Okay, so by the time this video is coming out, Anime Expo is gonna have come and gone. I'm gonna be back from AX, and ZZ will have been launched, of course, been launched by like a week at that point. Oh yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm recording this after the fact. I'm already back from AX, but I plan these videos out beforehand, so let's just get right into it. All right, Zenless Zone Zero is launched, and players are definitely going to be treating this game a lot similar to Genshin and Star Rail, and they're going to be looking towards the characters, the standard characters, the S ranks, the 5-star characters that are available right off the bat. One thing to note before we dive into this is that this game is indeed an action game, so it's more going to be akin to like Honkai Impact 3rd in that sense. Not going to be quite as much as Genshin Impact, since it's definitely a more laid back game. But I did want to discuss some of the S ranks that are available right off the bat, who you guys are probably looking forwards to and who you should be aiming towards going into the launch of Zenless Zone Zero. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. Since this is right after AX, I'm kind of playing through the game casually a little bit before I do it on stream. All of my knowledge and everything I'm talking about is going to be based off of CBT, since I did have the opportunity to play through both CBTs and really get a feeling understanding for all the different characters in the game, with the exception of Lycaon and Rina, who I'm actually going to be talking from secondhand experience from what I have seen and heard from friends who have also played during the CBTs. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into this. So as I mentioned at the start, most players are going to be looking towards the standard banner, where we have 6 characters right off the bat available to us to choose from the standard banner, whether you want them there or if you lose your 50-50 on the character banner. And that's going to be Grace, Rina, Koleda, Nekomata, Soldier 11, and Lycaon. Grace was the only anomaly specialty character in the game, with the exception of Piper, who's now been revealed and is in the game at launch. Rina is a support character, an electric support character. Grace is also electric. Koleda is your fire stun. Nekomata is a physical attacker. Soldier 11 is a fire attacker, and Lycaon is your ice stun. Each of them do different things, and each of them perform fairly well at what they do. It is nice to have a breath of fresh air to say there aren't necessarily any bad S rankers right off the bat at the start of the game, which is really nice to see. We see so many other games there's a very large disparity of having an amazing character right off the bat and also having another character that's just like absolutely useless garbage, chi. So it is really nice to see that all the characters here do perform very, very well. They all synergize with their respective teams and characters very, very well. But I do want to talk about what these characters do and kind of who you should be looking towards and trying to get on your account. So we're actually going to start with main girl right here, Grace. Now, as I mentioned, Grace is an electric anomaly character. She specializes in the anomaly attribute application and activation on enemies. She functions similar towards the idea of really leaning into elemental mastery and break in Genshin and Star Rail in terms of triggering these special effects to help the team deal massive damage while also dishing out master damage herself, capitalizing on the anomaly mastery and proficiency stats in the game. Being an electric character, she specializes in shock anomaly and really aims towards ramping up the shock damage and making sure that you can activate that attribute anomaly as much as possible over and over and over again. Being the only S rank anomaly character in the game, she is going to be very highly valued because of the fact that she's so specialized in ramping up that shock damage and ramping up that shock anomaly build up on top of it. She's a shoo-in for the shock anomaly team that I mentioned in the team video, and also because of the fact that she's an anomaly character, she fits really well in pretty much any team if you want to dive into that disorder anomaly as well. So because of the fact that she does what she does really well, she isn't too overpowering, but she's absolutely amazing because of the fact that she's so strong with stunning machine type enemies as well. Since there aren't very many electric type characters in the game, Grace we're going to put up here in the A rank. She's not too overpowering, but she does what she does very, very well. She's a very solid character. If you pull her, you're lucky because them feet, bro. Anyways, moving on to the next character we got on the plate. We're actually going to be talking about Rina. Rina is the only electric support character in the game at this moment. Now, Rina myself, I don't personally know too much about because of the fact that I never got the chance to actually play with Rina. So I'm just going to be going off of some of the secondhand information that I received from friends like EO Soul, Vanity, so on and so forth. Especially Vanity, bro, is a Rina simp through and through. But I'm also going to be speaking off of other information that I've read about and heard from in the game as well. So what makes Rina so amazing? Alongside Luciana, who was revealed before the game came out, we now know for sure, speaking after the fact, is that they're the only two characters in the game that are what we're dubbing puppet characters. Speaking from a Honkai Impact 3rd standpoint, they're the only characters in the game that actually have summoned entities. Now, summoned entities are essentially additional things that these characters summon to the field that they use to attack that can also be used to attack while off field. So essentially what Rina and also Luciana by proxy is able to do is they do their standard attacks and then they can leave the field, and then their minions, their summoned entities, stay on the field for about like 10 seconds or so from what I know, and are able to attack while off field. This is huge because it expands the combo potential of your team in the game, as you're able to attack, have these minions attack while you're probably in a cooldown state. But what makes her so amazing is that her additional ability increases the duration of shock on any enemies that are afflicted by shock, which means that they stay in that attribute anomaly state even longer, taking even more damage. But the real kicker comes from her core passive ability, which actually increases the penetration ratio of the entire squad. Now you're probably wondering, well, why does that matter? Well, if you don't know, penetration and penetration ratio is absolutely just unbelievably huge in this game, because what penetration ratio does is it ignores the percentage of the target's defense, and it's based on this penetration ratio stat. So all the penetration ratio, all the pen ratio that you have on your other characters actually stacks with whatever Rina gives, because of the fact that she gives 25% of her own penetration ratio up to 30%, which means you can have an additional 30% penetration ratio on your characters, predominantly your attacker, ideally, because your attacker is maybe the one that deals the most damage. It's an absolutely just invaluable ability to have on the team, which is why Rina, in combination with her summoned entity ability with her two puppets, makes her such a valuable character to the game. Her puppets for attacking off field, her shock duration extension, and her penetration ratio, absolutely invaluable. And so because of that, we're going to slap Rina right up there in the S rank. Undeniably one of the most valuable characters you can get from the standard banner, without a shadow of a doubt. Up next, we're going to be talking about Koleda. Like I mentioned, she is a fire stun character, and she's the character that I got from my 50 discounted pulls. Now you're probably wondering, why, Jay, are you sounding so down about this? Let me tell you why. So I did mention before that there aren't any bad S rank characters, S rank standard characters, but I do believe that Koleda is probably the worst of all of them. Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit as we move on, but she is a fire character and she's a stun character. Now, there aren't any fire stunners in the game. You can potentially say Ben, but Ben isn't really that good. He's the only defense character in the game, and it's nice that Koleda and Ben do have some synergy attacks that modify both Koleda's basic attack and her ultimate as well. But in terms of what she does, what she brings to the team, it isn't as valuable when you compare the fact that you can also get Soldier 11 and or Lycaon. Koleda does bring a lot of value, being she is a fairly good stunner, but she's pretty overly reliant on her enhanced skill to actually gain extra damage. The reason why her skill is such a huge part of her kit, and why her W engine as well has energy regen on top of it, which makes it such an invaluable resource for Koleda, is the fact that her skill enables basically an extra explosion to happen after the second or fourth hit of her basic attack string, which drastically increases the amount of days buildup she's able to dish out. So the fact that she's overly reliant on this means it takes a little bit longer than most stunners, at least in the future, more than likely as well, to build up that days meter. The only exception, of course, is Lycaon, which we'll talk about later. But if you're looking at her from just a standpoint of how good is her damage, how good is her stunning capabilities, it's average. Her fire damage isn't as good as Soldier, and her stunning capability isn't as good as Lycaon, which just makes her a lesser of two parts. She's like a jack of all trades, master of none. And she doesn't even get the second part of that phrase, which is more often better than a master of one. She's neither. She's like okay at best. And it kind of makes me sad that I pulled her. But she is still a very good character. Even though I got her, I still am not like frustrated with having her. She is still very good. The only thing is trying to activate disorder in a team that is not predominantly fire, because even her fire buildup isn't that good. She's just there to provide easier stunning capabilities, which is still pretty good. It's just not as good as Lycaon. It'll take, you'll see a lot more field time with Koleda as opposed to like Lycaon, which we'll talk about later. And so because of that reason, that Koleda is like, she's okay, she's not as good as the other two focused areas that she brings to the table, I'm gonna have to put Koleda in B tier. Like, she is good, but she's just not the best at what she does, unfortunately. So moving on to the next character, we're actually going to talk about Nekomata. She is a physical attacker, and she is very good. She is the only physical S rank attacker in the game. In a world currently of version 1.0, ZZZ, where we have 3 physical attackers, she makes the other 2 essentially look like they're hitting the enemies with a wet noodle. Not to mention just absolutely how unsafe they are as well. Nekomata is an absolutely insane physical damage dealer. She's arguably the most mobile damage dealer we have in the game as well. Her sheer maneuverability and agility is absolutely unparalleled. The only other character in the game that possibly even comes close is Ellen, at least currently in the game. Zhu Yuan is going to be a different story. But Nekomata is constantly moving around the battlefield, bouncing between enemies and just providing a sheer onslaught of damage, a sheer gauntlet rampage of damage across all enemies on the field. And despite not having a lot of days buildup, she actually does have quite a fair amount of anomaly buildup. So paired with Piper, you're just going to be triggering assault very often. Very often. Not to mention she has that schwa move, very similar to Weavile and Pokken, where she just constantly slides around the field underneath enemies, dealing damage. Not to mention she has like a 33% chance to do it more than once. And because of how fast she's attacking, because of how often she's actually going to be reaching that because of her attack speed, you're more than often going to be chaining together slides like there's no tomorrow. Especially when you have like a crap ton of enemies on the field as well, where your schwa hits multiple enemies, that slide is going to be just constantly going, and you're going to be essentially guaranteed, in a sense, going back and forth through enemies. Not to mention when paired with her W engine as well, which gives her a damage bonus when attacking enemies from behind. The fact that she slides through enemies means it's a lot easier to get behind enemies. And there's no need to worry as well because of the fact that she's so fast across the field. On top of it, if you don't think you're going to be able to reach an enemy in time, just kidding, you actually are, because she has some tech in the game where you can essentially teleport to any enemy onto the field if you so want to. Now, the way this is done is primarily through instantly canceling a dash attack, which will increase her range of teleportation, essentially, in a sense. But she's able to lock onto pretty much any enemy anywhere on the field and just barrage them with a flurry of attacks and just utterly mutilate them. Now, she isn't the greatest character because of the fact that her multipliers are fairly low, but it does counteract itself in the fact that her attack speed is just enormously high, to where those low multipliers don't even really mean that much, in a sense. And it's because of the fact that she is very good despite those low multipliers that I'm going to be putting her in A rank. She doesn't quite have that like sheer wow factor amazingness that Rina brings to the team, but she is in the same boat as Grace, where she is a very solid pick. And if you somehow get her and you didn't pick her, you're not going to be disappointed either. Okay, and next up on this list, we're going to be talking about the character I had actually spent the most time with across all the betas, and that is Soldier 11. Now, Soldier 11 is a bit funny. Most people are going to write her off as like a discount Ambi, like an attack version of Ambi. No. Definitely not. Soldier 11 is absolutely amazing, and you can achieve massive damage with Soldier 11. Soldier 11 is one of those characters to where you can play brain dead, but you don't necessarily have to, and ideally it's better not to. Contrary to popular belief, she actually does take a little bit more skill than some of the other characters in the game, like Nekomata, like Ellen, because of the fact that she has a mechanic that most people are actually going to ignore, and that's the fact that she actually has just frames. And it is this passive right here, this sub marking on her basic attack, fire suppression. So normally if you're just playing Soldier 11 like you would any other character in, say, Genshin, you're gonna find that she's just gonna be doing like mid physical damage, and you're only gonna really see that fire damage when you use your enhanced special attack and you gain that fire suppression state. But if you play your cards right, you can always have that fire suppression state up and always have that fire damage, and always take advantage of that additional fire damage bonus from the drive discs, from your ideally 5th drive disc, which would have fire damage bonus as the main stat. And I don't believe it really is that difficult to actually achieve that. If you really understand the nuances of Soldier 11, you'll always be in a rhythm to where you can just constantly lay on enemies and always have that fire damage up. The only exception is the very first attack you do with Soldier 11, the very first basic attack specifically. If you go into an enemy and you like home in on them with basic attack, that very first swipe is going to be physical damage, but every single swipe after that, including the first of a brand new string, will be fire damage as well. Not to mention, it feels ever so satisfying because you can continue that string from a dodge counter. And if you do use your enhanced skill, you can just lay in on the enemies even faster and not need to worry about hitting that timing. It is just a fair warning. It is what, 8 attacks, I believe? Yeah, 8 attacks. You do get the fire suppression state for either 8 attacks or 15 seconds. So considering that she has a 4 sequence basic attack string, you should get about 2 full sequences worth of basic attacks before you need to manually apply that fire suppression state to each individual attack again. But isn't all that difficult, especially if you, for whatever reason, want to maintain the rhythm of that sequence, even while you have your fire suppression state from the enhanced special up. Not to mention as well that her core passives grant additional damage. They increase that attack specific damage, basic attack or dash attack, when you have fire suppression active. And if you manage to activate the additional ability, Soldier 11 will also deal even more fire damage and get even more damage when attacking a stunned enemy as well. So because of the fact of how versatile she is, and I think that anybody that doesn't really know how to play Soldier 11 has skill issue, I think most people will probably put her in B rank. I'm tentative to put her in A rank. I want to put her somewhere between S and A rank because of the fact that, you know, Soldier 11 is just absolutely amazing. And despite the fact that in CBT3 I pulled like 2 or 3 copies of Soldier 11, she is an absolutely phenomenal unit, and in my opinion, one of the better standard units in the game, and arguably one of the best attackers in the game as well, like more so than Nekomata in my personal opinion. All right, and last up, we're going to be talking about the Ice Stunner Lycaon from the Victoria Housing Company. Now this guy is something special, let me tell you. Despite this man's furry status, dude is literally the best stunner in the game, and it isn't even close. Lycaon's capability is absolutely unmatched in the stunning department, and it really shows because when you have him in a team with Ellen, or pretty much any ice character, or any Victoria Housing character as a matter of fact, Lycaon provides utility that is just unrivaled in the game. Not only does Lycaon at base deal 40% increased days to enemies when you charge his basic attacks, using his enhanced special or an assist follow-up decreases the enemy's ice resistance by 25% as well, meaning it becomes even easier to shred with Ellen and possibly Miyabi in the future, provided Miyabi stays ice and also an attacker as well. Additionally, when you're able to actually activate his additional ability, which is part of his core passive, when Lycaon hits a stunned enemy, that enemy's stun damage multiplier gets increased by 35%, meaning the amount of damage they take while they're stunned goes from 200 to 235%. When you have, of course, the portion of time where you can chain attack. Once your chain attacks are done, that 200% goes down to 150, but that still goes up from 150 to 185% damage multiplier. Lycaon himself already does absolutely massive amounts of stun days buildup that it would be criminal to not say that Lycaon is one of the best characters in the game as a version 1.0. And so because of that, Lycaon is going to be going up in the S rank with Rina. Fitting for the S rank to be filled with the Victoria Housing Company characters. Kind of unfortunate that Corrin is like one of the worst characters in the game. Now, as a little bit of a special, I want to talk about the 2 characters we had from CBT 2 and 3 as well. I'm not going to talk about Miyabi because Miyabi is more than likely going to see changes from CBT 1. However, Ellen and Zhu Yuan were in CBT 2 and then CBT 3 as well, respectively, for Zhu Yuan. And I had the opportunity to play with both of them and test them. And on top of it, on my account currently on the live servers, I have Ellen and A. Yeah, Ellen is without a doubt the best character in the game right now, and it isn't even a question. Most people are probably going to be just face rolling with their account, with their characters. They're not going to realize that Ellen should never be dealing physical damage. Ellen has a running state. Now, what this means is essentially you double dodge immediately, and Ellen goes into a running state where she can either quick charge or she can hold a charge attack and gain 1 flash freeze charge. You should essentially always be doing double of that. In my personal opinion, doing double full charge, because that means you get maximum 6 flash freeze charges. You can just lay in on the enemies for 2 full basic attack sequences. Not to mention her mobility is absolutely insane, and her just general multipliers are ludicrous. Some of the largest in the game. I mean, look at this. Level 3. 2,200% damage multiplier. It's an absolute no-brainer. Ellen is in the S tier, bar none. There is zero question in my mind. If you have Ellen, it's essentially a free pass. if you this is like the peak team right now in my personal opinion. I think Rina over Soul Kaku personally, just because of the penetration ratio, but Soul Kaku as well is pretty good. I did talk about this in the team video, which you guys should go and watch if you haven't already. By far, these Ellen is the best in the game, combined with Lycaon and Rina, and it's just unstoppable. And last but not least, this is going to be a bit of a controversial take. I'm gonna talk about Zhu Yuan. I know we're only in the first week, but I did get to play Zhu Yuan myself in the beta. Bro, she is like the most fun character I've ever played in like any gacha game. No questions, bar none. Zhu Yuan is the most impressive, most fun character I've ever played. Her sheer mobility on the field in combination with just what she brings to the table in terms of just raw damage output, being able to constantly trigger corruption, the corruption attribute anomaly in combination with Nicole. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Not to mention, if you're dealing her charge attacks, she essentially has what I'm calling guard points, even though they're like auto dodges in a sense. You can move around during her charge attack when she's firing off her blaster. And if you do that, if you move around during the time that an enemy attacks you, it'll actually count as a dodge, meaning you get time fracture there and also additional damage as well from a dodge counter, which is huge. Her mobility is absolutely insane. The sheer rapid fire attacks rival Nekomata. Her mobility across the entire field means that you should never be getting hit whatsoever. She's got the fattest dumpy in the world, and she deserves, in my personal opinion, to be ranked in S tier. I think she's Ellen tier. She takes a lot more higher skill. I believe for most other people, they're gonna put Zhu Yuan down here. In my own personal opinion, there's just zero question Zhu Yuan is right up here with Ellen, and there's just no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I feel bad about having Soldier here. We're gonna name these for the sake of making things a lot more digestible. The hottest take in existence coming in as I rename these. Personally, that's just how I see it. I do kind of want to put Rina down here in 0.5 just because as a support, while she does provide a lot to the team in terms of penetration ratio and shock extension, not everybody is able to take advantage of that, and her primary function is going to be that penetration ratio that she provides to the team. Also the ability to attack while off field, but it's primarily going to be that penetration ratio, and she may get power creeped in the future, so I'm like tentative to put her in tier 0. But yeah, so these are the characters that I would say, you know, you look out for the most. If you're free to play, I would recommend Ellen over Zhu Yuan just because she's easier to deal with, and not to mention she has synergy with some of the other standard characters in the game, since you're also getting you have a standard character selector at 300 pulls on standard banner. I would say if you're going for Ellen and you manage to get her, choose Lycaon. Choose Lycaon because then you can slot in Soul Kaku into that team, and you have a guaranteed ice team right there because you get Soul Kaku from clearing the third stage of the stable node of Shiyu defense after beating chapter 2, which you unlock after beating chapter 2, and you just get an absolutely phenomenal team right then and there. If you're going for Zhu Yuan, hey man, I don't blame you. I'm all for that dumpy, but just know that she will be the highest skill character in the entire game, and it is no question in my mind because there's a lot of management of trying to make sure you don't get hit, trying to keep your bullet gauge up to full. You can hold up to, I believe, either like 12 or 15 bullets, making sure you're able to manage that and make sure you always have bullets in your gauge so that Zhu Yuan can constantly just burst down anybody. She's definitely gonna be the highest skill cap character in the game. Definitely the highest skill floor as well, because most people are gonna put her either down here or even here if they don't know how to play her correctly. But in my mind, Zhu Yuan is right up there in tier 0. We'll have to wait until she comes out to live servers in a couple weeks though. But with all that being said and done, if you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to drop a like on the video and a sub to the channel for more content like this and more. Be happy and fill the world with kindness, everyone, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Done it.